Back now to our top story, the emerging crisis in journalism and constant clashes over dissenting views at major news organizations. Joining us now is Chris Wallace, the host of Fox News Sunday and author of the new book, Countdown 1945, The Extraordinary Story of the Atomic Bomb and the 116 Days That Changed the World. Welcome, Chris.
Good to be with you, Howie.
Is journalism becoming more intolerant? I mean, 10 or 20 years ago, we have seen the publisher of the New York Times completely flipping and criticizing a conservative op-ed that he had defended because a bunch of newsroom staffers didn't like it. You know,
it feels like the inmates are running the asylum. You know, I've been critical sometimes of the Times, and I think that their liberal tendency tends to bleed out under their news coverage. Some people have accused Fox of the same thing in terms of our tendencies. But I thought that what happened in the last week at the Times was just extraordinary. So Tom Cotton writes this article about sending the army, sending the military to quell the protests at the height of all of the violence. And it's in the op-ed page, where you get columns and various views of various political stripes. And there was a tremendous blowback from inside the Times, and so much so that the publisher, as you say, Mr. Sulzberger, decided that he had to defend it. And then there was so much more blowback that he caved. Right. He then said it was bad. The paper said it was bad. They apologized for it. And the op-ed editor, a pretty distinguished journalist named James Bennett, I'm not quite sure whether he quit or was fired. It was a profile in a lack of courage.
It's clear that he was forced out. Now, given the long history of racism and police brutality in this country, crystallized by the killing of George Floyd, does it now seem to you that there are many people in newsrooms, this goes far beyond the New York Times, who just don't believe that dissenting views, let's say sending in the military to control riots, should be aired at all, that it's just too offensive to them?
Yes. I mean, clearly, if you read some of the tweets, some of the online statements that members of the New York Times, reporters in the Times said, that's exactly what they were saying. Look, there are not two sides to every issue. Racism, there's not two sides. There's not a, well, yeah, but here's why racism is good. There are not two sides to Adolf Hitler. Here's why Hitler was been misunderstood. But there are two sides. Certainly, it's not over the line to even discuss the issue of how you put down violent protests. And that's what Tom Cotton was doing. He was saying, send in active duty military. I'm not sure I agree with him about it, and it certainly would have been an extraordinary step, but it doesn't seem to me that it's so far over the line that there aren't two sides to that argument. And you can object to it. You can say it's absolutely wrong. If you're a reader or a reporter at the Times, you can write a counter argument and hope that they publish it. Right. But to suggest that it was improper for that, and this is a U.S. senator, to suggest it was improper for him to even express that opinion, boy, that's not good.
It's called debate. It's called free expression. Now, my view is that this new double standard, this new woke standard, has its roots in part in candidate Trump. That there were many journalists in this country who decided they would just toss out the old rule book of standards and fairness because they deemed Donald Trump to be such a threat to the country. They wanted to stop him from winning the White House. Then they wanted to get him impeached. Now they want to see him defeated in November. Do you agree with me? And do you think that's a slippery slope?
Yeah, I absolutely do. But I think it's even worse than that. And it didn't start, in my opinion, with Donald Trump. I'll just put it in personal terms. I get complimented a lot of people see me. They're not seeing me very much right now with the quarantining. I get complimented for being fair. And while on the other hand I like compliments, I'm actually find it fairly depressing because, as you and I know, you're not as old as I am, but I'll call us both old timers. It used to be that fairness was what kept you from getting fired. That was the minimum requirement for a reporter, is that you're fair. You got complimented if you were a good writer or a good reporter, but fairness was...
Yeah, you didn't get a medal for being fair.
But it seems... Yeah, but today I think that it's gotten so polarized, whether it's on cable news, whether it's in newspapers, that fairness is kind of unusual, and that is a terribly sad reflection on our business.
Indeed. Now, there's another side to this. You gave a speech a few months ago in which you said that President Trump was engaged in the most direct, sustained assault on freedom of the press in our history, but you also faulted the conduct in some of the media. Explain.
Well, I did, and I think that Trump calling the media the enemy of the American people speaks for itself. I think it's outrageous. But having said that, I think, and again, I don't know whether he's the cause or it was happening. I think it was happening before him. You see some reporters now who have become advocates. I see it in the press briefings now. You know, I was pretty tough in the press briefings with Ronald Reagan and his press secretaries in the 80s, but we were basically trying to get information. Some of the press briefings now, I see the White House press corps is supposed to be one of the top jobs in journalism. It's more playing gotcha or more just trying to get in arguments and advance their point of view. That's not what we're supposed to be doing, and that's what I see too often among my colleagues in the media. I'm not holding myself up as something grand, but I think too many reporters have fallen into the role of being advocates and frankly, with this president, anti-Trump advocates. And, you know, we got to be neutral. We got to play it straight and you know, call balls and strikes, whether it's something the president does that's good or bad, whether it's something that Joe Biden does that's good or bad. I don't think we can be taking a side and in this argument.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think taking a side, if you're catering to the anti-Trump side, has become a business model for many organizations. But final question on this, you know, it's easy for younger journalists to dismiss, you call us old-timers, to say, well, your brand of journalism doesn't change anything. Your companies weren't sensitive enough to black frustration and anger over the years, and that's why what matters now is social justice, not some abstract notion of objectivity.
I think that the truth, you know, what's the line? The truth shall set you free. I mean, it was actually predated me. You know, it was the journalism, the 60s and 70s, the coverage of the civil rights movement, the coverage of the brutality of Southern sheriffs and beating people on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. Nothing has done more to advance the civil rights movement than just shining a light on reality. I think when reporters start advocating, reporters, look, editorial pages, opinion people, they want to advocate. That's what they're being paid to do. But when reporters start taking sides, I think that's very dangerous.